Mind the gap. Mind the gap.
Mind the gap. If you've ever been to London, you've heard it hundreds of times in one day. It means pay attention. Pay attention to the space between here and there, the curb and that first step onto the bus or the train. Mind the gap. From when I first studied this text, this gospel story, this Emmaus story, in scripture class 50 years ago, I've always heard it as a story of friendship. Two friends walking side by side and talking together, sharing their pain and disillusionment and dreams as they walked. And looking back on that, they realized that as we talked and walked together, these two friends, did not our hearts burn within us? Did something catch fire in us? In that space, in that gap between us, was that not the risen Christ who appeared to us? Even as we were conversing, even as we broke bread together, was that not the risen Christ who slipped into that space between us? People are saying that young people are well positioned for this sheltering at home that is mandated around most of the country right now. They were almost too good, our young people are. They were almost too good at technology, and oftentimes they were missing the human touch on several other levels because of so much communication, conversation, all online. But I think we, the rest of us, would all agree right now that it's paying off for them. They were, in a sense, prepared for this. But not my generation, that's for sure. But if I were to go one step beyond that, I would say that celibates, women and men who freely chose to remain unmarried for the sake of the kingdom, are also well positioned for this time of quarantine, sheltering at home. Because I and my sisters and brothers who have taken this sort of promise or vow, we've had to learn how to be intimate 6 feet apart for some 43 years of celibate life, for me at least. It's not become so much a deprivation, though there is a loss in that, but rather over the years, it's become sort of an opening. The space between us is sort of an opening to other ways of being close. Just because of that vow, that promise to remain unmarried, doesn't mean we're dispensed from being close to other human beings. It just means be close in another way. People have been writing me, concerned for me, because I am such a hugger. And that's true. I am such a hugger. And it has been hard not to hug, especially at the end of a conversation, as a way to bring it all home, or at the end of a time together, like the seniors leaving, without that hug now that sends them off, I hope, knowing they were loved. But even that has had to change for me over the years. In the past recent, that Me Too world that we're all a part of now, all of a sudden I couldn't just assume that everybody loved to be hugged. So I had to begin when I would meet a new person by saying, "Hey, are you a hugger?" And then if they were, I would hug them, hug the heck out of them. And if they weren't, that was cool too. Though always a bit of a letting go, but that's what love does, right? People are getting angry right now, it seems, about these restrictive policies. They're feeling like these policies, these restrictive policies, are being imposed on them from outside of them and taking away their freedom. Freedom to work, for example. Freedom to go somewhere without a mask on. Freedom to close the gap. Mind the gap. That is what they say in Britain whenever you're stepping onto that bus from that curb. Mind the gap. Indeed. But I'd like to propose to you, based on my experience, that I think is true for everybody, and certainly everybody in your life, perhaps but your spouse, and with all your friends. That space between you and him and her or her can become the most creative space in your life. That gap can become the most creative space in your life. So much can be discovered in that empty space, 6 feet apart, between us. Whole new ways of being together. It can add an underlining, an emphasis, for example, on what that gospel talks about. An emphasis on the power of conversation to bring us together. The power of conversation to transform us, as surely as it did those two friends conversing along the way. According to some of the greatest wisdom tradition of our church, the greatest pleasure in the universe, is knowing and being known. Knowing another human being and being known by another human being is the greatest pleasure in the universe. Almost every conversation should give us further knowledge of each other, strengths and weaknesses. We should always be getting to know each other better, you and I. That's the bottom line. That's what matters the most. And as good as touch is, and as somebody who loves touch and hugs, believe me, I know how good touch is, how much it can mean and feel along the way. And the truth is, touch is part of the sacrament of marriage. That's how important it is. It's a powerful part of bringing the sacrament of marriage into sacramentness. It's essential. It can also be a way to avoid conversation, though. Touch can. It can be one of the reasons we ask people, for example, to wait till marriage. It's not because touch is bad, not at all because touch is bad. Touch is good. It's because we want them. We want them to do the work of getting to know each other conversationally, friend to friend first, so that that can be the baseline of their marriage for the next 70 years. If they don't have that baseline of knowing how to be good friends first, knowing how to have conversation that is deep and life-changing together, they won't have a good baseline through all the ups and downs of married life. Intimate touch, again, as good as it is, too soon in a relationship can end up being a shortcut. And we don't end up doing the good work of learning how to be partners in conversation. Partners in conversation first. And let touch, intimate touch, emerge from knowing and being known across that gap first. You see, my friends, there's no limits to intimacy when it comes to conversation. No limits to intimacy when it comes to conversation. There's no limits to your choice to reveal yourself to me and my choice to receive the gift you are giving me of who you are. And there's no limiting from you of who I am and who I know myself to be, and me giving myself to you. To you. In words. Intimacy means knowing and being known first. It's always a process. It emerges over all the years. And in the process of conversation, real conversations that build up over the years together, it is only achieved when two people choose to be vulnerable to each other. We know that. Sharing the secrets of their hearts with each other. Even their sharing full of possible misunderstanding and judgment by the other. And yet, as fraught as vulnerability is in friendship, knowing and being known is the greatest pleasure in the universe. Learning to be naked first, heart to heart. Heart to heart. And that means vulnerability, and that's not the fun part. But moving through those vulnerabilities together with another human being and sharing those secrets of our hearts one with another. Let me say it one more time. It's just the greatest pleasure in the universe, and I mean pleasure. I don't disagree with science really ever. I don't usually disagree with the leaders of our community overall. But I do want to take exception to that social distancing thing. No, I don't mean that I'm in favor of large gatherings of some people coming to church, for example, on Sundays now. Now's not the time, until we get the green light from science and our local leaders, and I'm looking so forward to that day. But what I take exception to is what they're calling that gap, those 6 feet between us. They're calling it social distancing, as if we could truly distance ourselves from true socializing, from being social. No. Granted, there is such a thing as physical distancing. That's for sure. And I wish they could just call it physical distancing, keeping a physical distance of 6 feet and more between us at all times and without exception. But that's so different than social distancing, because I know to be true is that while physical touch, and I know this in my experience of the last 43 years, I know this to be true, that even while physical touch and togetherness can be limited, there is absolutely no limit. Let me repeat, there is absolutely no limit to how close people can be through conversation to knowing and being known. Whether that's walking 6 feet apart in Forest Park, across miles from Zoom. Even right now, as you're watching the intimacy of this Eucharist, there is no limit to knowing and being known. You can have a face mask over your mouth and nose. You can be 6 feet, 10 feet apart, miles apart on Zoom or on FaceTime. You can even be just on a phone, and there's no limit to closeness, to how close we can be to each other, heart to heart, one conversation at a time, mask or no mask. There's no limit to how close people can be in good conversation. Cor ad cor loquitur, St. John Newman said. Cor ad cor loquitur, it means literally heart speaks to heart. And that's the truth. On Easter, I began with the question, how are you? How are you doing? How are you holding up? There's so much going on in you and me these days especially. There's so much to say. Why would we ever short-circuit that now when we maybe even have more time to say it to each other and to hear it? All of us can choose to go deeper with our answer to that question when we are asked. sincerely, how are you doing? We can choose to be vulnerable. We can talk about whether this particular day I am honestly feeling one of the big four: sad, mad, glad, or scared. I'm always feeling one of those four by whatever name underneath: sad, mad, glad, scared. Which am I right now with you asking me that question right now? As I said, I've been intentionally celibate for 43 years because of the choice I made 43 years ago to continue to make, and I continue to make, one day at a time, to remain unmarried for the sake of the kingdom of God. We do call that celibacy. But I've learned before I made that choice that even though I was consciously and freely choosing to limit the measures of intimate touch with another human being and all that goes with that, there is no limit to how close I can be to another human being. And if there's anything that brings me to my knees in wonder and gratitude at the end of a day, it's an intimate conversation that changes my life because of this conversation that happened in trust. The only thing that limits intimacy is fear, weaknesses, and my sins. Therefore, I can say that there are no limits emotionally to your closeness to people in your life. None at all. With every single person you meet, perhaps other than your spouse, if you're blessed with marriage. There's no limits to what can happen there, that closeness. Even if you can't hug or kiss or get proximate to somebody or can't even shake hands or hold, there's no limit, really. Therefore, I would propose that we no longer call it social distancing, because that suggests there are limits to our ability to connect. Why not just call it physical distancing and then do everything we can with everything else to be connected with each other? And as a matter of fact, I hope what you're hearing me say, in the light of this story of these two friends conversing on the way and finding their hearts burning inside of them, and then realizing as they look back, oh my gosh, that was God who slipped into our conversation. The risen Christ. So that as a matter of fact, physical distancing can create an even deeper desire to connect in other ways. Conversation is where intimacy, true intimacy, knowing and being known, happens. Mind the gap, because in that space between us, 6 feet apart, resurrection happens. Something new is born.